A very good evening to you. You are watching Biz1st in Focus, and today on the show we'll be featuring a prominent personality in the service sector. He has worked for over 30 years in the service sector, and he's helped businesses implement the most vital and the most important business model to ever roam the earth, that is the Cirqual business model and the service model, which has been hailed as one of the eye-openers for many businesses in the service sector. And today I take the pleasure of introducing Professor Parasuruman, who is a world-renowned service sector researcher. Thank you very much for joining us today.
My pleasure, Stephanie.
Well, Professor, first of all, Sri Lanka as a country was at least slated to be driven by agriculture or agricultural sector, but things have turned around now. Experts have shown that it's not agriculture that leads or drives the economy, it's services. But at this juncture, what do you think Sri Lanka should really work on in order to make this one of the vital driving forces of the economy?
Well, I think Sri Lanka is at a very, very opportune moment now to capitalize on this change in the mindset from an agriculture-based economy to more of a service-based economy. A number of other countries are already, becoming heavily service-focused. And one of the challenges, though, when you want to be a highly successful service-focused economy, is that services, when compared to physical products or manufactured products, are difficult to define, understand, measure, and improve. My interest 30 years ago on this subject of quality of service, quality of the customer experience, also stemmed from this need for some new thinking and new knowledge. And that's what produced the so-called Cirqual model, and also preceding that, the so-called GAPS model of service quality. So I think given that there is the realization that the Sri Lankan economy is much more of a service economy, there is excellent potential. And I think one other observation I would make is that this is my very first visit to Sri Lanka, and second day in Sri Lanka, in fact. This is a beautiful country from what I've seen, what little I've seen. I've seen more of it in the next couple of days. And it's a tourism destination. When you think of tourism, it is all customer service and hospitality.
Right.
I mean, you have the natural resources. So I think there's great opportunity to apply some of the scientific principles, which are actually quite basic in terms of their application.
Right. So you've come up with one of the prominent models in the service sector, which is the Cirqual model,
Yes.
Which means that through services can be measured.
Yes.
So you are giving businesses a tool to measure it. But my question to you is, how can you now, when a business reviews its progress throughout the year, the services will have a number and the rest will have another number, the productivity will have another number. But how do you measure, how do you individually measure the quality of service? How do you individually measure the hospitality, the confidence of the people? How do you do that?
Very good question. Just like the proverb says, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Here, when it comes to customer service, the beholder is the customer. So I think, along with the change in the mindset from an agriculture, manufacturing-oriented economy to more of a service economy, organizations and particularly companies specifically need to sort of understand that quality, especially service quality, is defined by the customer, not by the company. So the whole Cirqual model is based on the fact that you need to start with the customer. How do customers evaluate quality of service? If you're manufacturing a car or a computer or an iPhone or whatever it is, manufacturers can set quality specifications because you're dealing with something concrete, right? But when what you're measuring is hospitality or the experience that tourists have in Sri Lanka as they're traveling, that is much more difficult to define. So that you need to go back to the customers and find out what is it that they expect. All customers do have some mental benchmarks about what excellence in terms of how they are treated, how they feel, really means. And then they compare that with what they actually get from a given service provider, be it a hotel or an airline or a restaurant. You know, so that is as simple as that. You know, customers, and typically there is a gap. So what the CircWall instrument or measurement approach does is very systematically looks at that gap and tries to understand what are different attributes on which customers make this evaluation. So there are 5 major categories. You know, for example, one of the categories is reliability of the service. Reliability of the service simply means, does the service organization deliver on the promises it makes to customers? And again, you can take any simple example, like you know, hotel companies would say, you come, you will have the fantastic experience if you look at their advertisements and commercials and so forth. But then when you actually go to the hotel, a lot of times there are
total letdown.
there are you know, letdowns in terms of so that you know, that is a lack of reliability. You promise something, but you're not delivering on it. So like that.
And with social media coming in, the process is made even easier for people
to share their experiences. You know, you can share. Customers today can share their experiences right on the spot with you know, hundreds and thousands of their friends by posting on social
and
media.
how much of a challenge is it for businesses, as in now the businesses have to really work towards it even harder than they did before?
Yes, absolutely. They, you know, they more than ever, the businesses have to now stay on their toes all the time. And what the CircWall type of approach does is it gives a template of different kinds of attributes that customers might be thinking about, and therefore companies should be proactively focusing on. You know, a lot of companies make mistakes in treating customers well or delivering services, and then they try to recover from it. And some of them don't even try. You know, they immediately put the fault on the customer. They say, you don't know how busy we are. You know, wait, or you know, that kind of rude treatment of customers. That is not good quality customer service, right? So the CircWall model and the approach, you know, suggests some starting templates that companies can beforehand use as they design their services and as they plan to deliver the services, so that when the actual delivery does occur, the gap is as small as possible. It's as simple as that, and it's as complicated as that, because it's more easily said than done. But you know, there is a way to do it. So that's what I've been trying to preach, so to speak, based on my work.
Well, there's definitely a way to do it. We'll head into a short commercial break, and when we come back, we'll have more on Biz1st in Focus. Stay tuned. Welcome back. I'm in conversation with Professor Parasuraman. He is a well-known name in the service sector, especially for his model, CircWall. Well, we are in conversation with him about the service sector and how exactly Sri Lanka can improve its service sector in all industries and all sectors. Well, first of all, there's always so much of skepticism that you have when a product or a business fails you at one point. You find it difficult to trust the business, trust the one who is selling the business. And the customers show that skepticism, and that itself is a downfall for your product. But productivity being at a really good level, and also services being at a really good level, you see less of a demand from a customer's point of view, from their end. How do you really bounce back and be resilient in the service sector?
Okay, let me clarify something about what productivity really means and how that might relate to quality of service, because you're touching on two very important things that are intertwined, actually. When companies think of productivity, particularly service productivity improvements, you know, they are thinking about, you know, how do we get more for less? You know, that is the measure of productivity, right? Productivity is how much you get back relative to what you put in to any kind of process. That is the typical definition of productivity. But when it comes to service, it gets a little bit more complicated, because customers whom you are trying to serve, they are involved in the production of the service, in the sense that compared to producing a car, where the car is built in a factory and then it's checked for quality,
Right.
and then it's shipped out, and then the customer goes to the showroom to look at the car and then buys the car and experiences it.
Right.
But when a customer is going to have a hotel experience, staying in a hotel, 5-star hotel, whatever it is, the service is being produced as it is being consumed. So production doesn't occur before the customer experience. Both occur simultaneously. That's very important, particularly from the view of productivity, because sometimes when companies cut corners to provide the service, let's say much more rapidly or much more efficiently, that may not necessarily be consistent with what the customer is expecting.
Right.
And sometimes companies use technology. I mean, in these days we can talk about the increasing role of technology in delivering service. In fact, in some of my current research focuses on that, the role of technology in service delivery. And what my research is showing in that domain is that not all customers are equally enthusiastic about being served through technology-based interfaces as opposed to the normal human-based.
Yeah.
On the one hand, some customers actually prefer to deal with technology. When they go to the airport, they like to use the automatic check-in kiosk.
Right.
They'd rather not interact with any person. But at the other extreme, there are also some people that dread touching any kind of machine to self-serve, even though it may be very simple. And the company might think, oh, it's very easy to use.
Right.
Some customers feel very uncomfortable.
And that's exactly, I think, what happened in India as well, where people had to literally go to an ATM and get their notes soon after the
demonetization.
Yes.
Yeah, right. So some people have never been to an ATM, and there are all kinds of problems. But anyway, to get back to the relationship between service productivity and service quality, yes, technology is a great way to improve the efficiency of your operations, because you are spending much less. Your human resource costs are often the highest costs. As a service business, it's very expensive. So if you can replace those functions that the humans are performing with technology, there may be some initial investment that you might have to make, but then the marginal cost of providing more services through technology is almost virtually zero in many cases. So companies are enamored by replacing human servers, and also technology makes less mistakes than humans.
Right.
So all that is fine. But then from the customer's perspective, especially if they have these misgivings about technology-based interfaces, then a lot of times customers have to spend more effort on their own part in making sure that they get what they realize. But the customer, if the customer expends a lot of mental energy, emotional energy, and if they are frustrated, if they are scared of the technology, all of that is lowering the productivity of the customer.
Right.
We can also think of productivity from the customer's perspective in terms of what do the customers, in terms of resources, give to the process relative to what they are getting back. So what they are getting back is the experience, but to get that experience, if they are expending a lot of energy and time and frustration, then their productivity is very low. Company's productivity may be high, but their productivity is low. So one of the things that I'm working on currently as we speak is this relationship between the quality of service and the productivity on the customer's part relative to the quality of service and what the companies think that they are providing in terms of productivity. If you don't mind, I'll give you an example.
Sure.
Recently, I was staying at one of the major 5-star hotels, and one of the things that the hotel had done was to put a very complex bedside electronic panel, which can be used by the customer to control all of the electronics in the room and all of the mechanical devices also, like opening and shutting curtains.
Okay.
So all of those things can be controlled by this little panel. So at first I was very excited because here is a very neat technology with a lot of buttons, and I can control everything in the room. But then upon closer examination, I felt that I had to spend like about 30 minutes trying to understand what all of those functions, different functions were. So being an engineer, I actually quite enjoyed that challenge. So at first I thought, after half an hour, I had mastered it. So I went about my business during the day. At night I came back to the hotel, and then I was getting ready to go to bed and sleep, very tired. And then I was trying to turn off some lights, and then I managed to turn off most of the lights, and then the bathroom light I couldn't turn off. So I pressed one button, and then the curtain started opening. So maybe I was tired. I was making some mistakes, and then I pressed another button, thinking that might be the bathroom light, and then this mood lighting started.
Right.
So my point is, and finally I got out of bed and went to the bathroom to see if there is a switch.
There was an actual switch.
No, there is no switch.
Okay.
There is no switch because everything is there.
Right.
So now, that the company actually invested a lot of resources in putting this technology in, thinking that it will increase the customer's experience. But, being an engineer, I was quite frustrated with that experience.
Right.
So it was instead of being a win-win type of thing, it was a loss-loss. The company invested a lot of...
So there's a thin line between innovation
innovation and service quality. They have to be thought about holistically.
Right.
So you need different strokes for different folks, as the expression goes, right? Some people might, really enjoy those technologies. I would much rather prefer, even though I'm technically very savvy, mentally I'd rather have the switches in the right places and not a complicated system like that.
Right. So Professor, just talk about education. But do you think the education system is given enough attention on services?
Education, I don't think has done, in my opinion, again, this is not based on any research or anything, but my impression is that, the quality of the customer service as a subject in and of itself is still not widespread.
Right.
There's a lot of courses on psychology, consumer behavior in the marketing field and so forth. But I think more can be done about how do individuals serve each other and serve others. Right. So I think there is more of a
So
need.
most theories are more experimental and experiential than it being learned through a book.
Right. I think, we are education, the purpose of education, especially higher level, college level education, is to train people to become productive members of society and to become the leaders of society, right? And the leaders of society have to serve society. So again, it boils down to service. Regardless of whether you go to work for the government or another company or a hospital or whatever, doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter what your function is either. So you're all in the service business. So from that perspective, I think there's definitely a need for some overall umbrella course, if you want to call it that, on how to become better at serving.
Right. You've been a consultant for how long now?
About 25 plus
25 years. So I'm sure you faced a lot of hurdles when being a consultant, and challenges and stumbling blocks. But can you single out just one challenge that was really hard to break into?
I would, if I were to put my finger on one thing, it would probably be corporate culture. When working with a lot of companies, both in my research as well as in my consulting projects, when I go do the research and then especially after doing the research and when I go to present the results, everybody sits in a room, especially at top level, managers, they all agree with whatever I'm saying. Okay, this makes sense, we need to change this, we need to change this. And then after I leave, pretty much everything, goes back to where it was. And why is that? I have a feeling that it's because of, entrenched cultures, entrenched way of operating. So I think there's got to be a lot of thinking out of the box that needs to occur. I think corporate cultures, especially at the topmost levels, have to be very nurturing. Very nurturing of innovative thinking on the part of younger people that are coming up, and I think that needs to occur. That's my very simple answer to a very important question.
I think that was perfect. So I'm in conversation with Professor Parasuraman, and when we come back we will speak a lot about service sector, because he is after all the man who came up with the best model to improve the service sector. So stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching Biz1st in Focus, and we are in conversation with Professor Parasuraman. Thank you very much for joining us. Well, before I gave in for a break, I was thinking about how the whole shift in growth. We see Brexit coming in and Europe seeing a slight stumble, and also with the new president of the US being appointed, there's also a lot of speculation of how businesses are going to be. They may not be stable, but right now it looks good. But you don't see as much growth in Europe or in America as you did 15 years ago or even 20 years ago. So do you think South Asia particularly, could be the next rising region?
I think it seems to be going that way. We saw China emerging as a global power, and right now in terms of growth rates, India is actually surpassing China. And I see a lot of excitement in Sri Lanka, and from what I hear from everybody, it's been a sea change in the last few years in Sri Lanka about the business outlook and climate. And just yesterday I was reading in one of the papers about a survey of economic outlook within the country done by, and I think most of the business people that were surveyed are more optimistic than pessimistic about growth in Sri Lanka. So I think definitely Asia, Southeast Asia, China are really the happening places in terms of a surge. What's going to happen in the United States, where I currently reside, there's no telling. I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty, let's put it that way, and we'll have to wait and see. Europe, of course, is going through a lot of throes of the changes, Brexit, and then there are other problems also with refugees going in from the troubled regions. So there are a lot of uncertainties, business-related uncertainties. I think compared to that, there's relative stability in the Asian markets from that perspective. So I think the opportunities are there, and from a service perspective, since that's my domain, there is tremendous advantage.
So do you think that Asians are really prepared for this? Because if growth comes along, are we well armed in order to make this happen, especially when it comes to education, how we are going to convert that into skill and put into action?
Yeah, that is, I think, going to be challenging. That is going to be challenging. I think, as I said, there is a lot of potential and opportunity there to capitalize on this, emerging set of conditions that are favorable to business here compared to Europe and other traditional, Western countries. But the conversion, I think, needs to occur through innovative thinking, and innovative thinking, I think, rests a lot more on the younger generations than old people who have their own fixed mindsets. And these younger generations, through their training and also further in their careers through the support that is provided by the organizations that are using them, and the corporate cultures in which they operate, have to, those kinds of cultures have to nurture that kind of thinking. No longer can you say, okay, we have this hierarchical approach and we are going to just use that. Because I think it requires new ways of thinking. Especially with the social media and digital invasions that are occurring in a lot of different domains. I think those are potentially very powerful.
So is that what made you shift from engineering to the service sector? Is there any connection between this? Did you feel like you were in the same place?
Engineering to service sector is a very big leap. When I shifted from engineering to management, so let's start there. I finished my undergraduate degree from IIT Madras. Used to be called Madras, now it's Chennai. So as an engineer, I was a young, 17, 18-year-old, or 20-year-old when I got my engineering degree, and then I really didn't, plan out my career or anything. In those days, it was, I guess, more of an image thing to go into one of the management institutes, leading management, if you can get in. So that's how I got into one of the two leading institutes. There were only two institutes in India at that time. This was the early 70s I'm talking about.
So it's very unlikely of an engineer becoming consulting. It's quite rare.
So a lot of my classmates also took that path.
Okay.
They went from engineering to...
So do you think that you made a smart enough choice?
Well, I think so. I mean, based on hindsight, going from engineering to management, not because I planned it that way, because it happened that way. But by management, most of virtually all of my classmates ended up in the corporate sector. I went to academia, so that was a change. So that conversion occurred when I was going through my MBA.
I can certainly say it has served you well, because we're having you here on the show, which means it has served you quite well. It was a lovely conversation with you, Professor Parasuraman. It was an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Stephanie. It's my pleasure as well. Thank you.
Well, that was Professor Parasuraman, the man behind one of the most prominent service sector models called CircWall. Tomorrow, or next week rather, I will be having a new guest. There will be also insights that will be shared by that guest. So stay tuned as I meet you again next week. So signing off for News First, this is Stephanie Lazarus.